Hello and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach Insider. My name is Ben,
And I'm Chris.
I'm Swizz.
and thank you for joining us. It is carnage everywhere. It is absolutely horrific. BT's not happy. He butchers names. I forgot that's what happens in AFL footy. It's absolutely a mess out there. And the best way to describe it, it's like the old school minesweeper where you're tiptoeing around your fucking premiums and you never know when you're going to explode. It was so bad. So many people that did bad. I was like, I had them in my team at one point. Absolutely horrible. Boys, pleasure to have you on. A lot to get through today.
You know what? You
Indeed.
just mentioned that, mate. I just completely forgot because everyone's bagging about BT, and I was like, oh, that's why I didn't hear any of it because I went to the games he commentates. That's the key.
That's the key. Then you can completely ignore him.
Yeah.
I actually like. I know this is very biased, but I didn't mind the carnage because, so like someone like Laird, who I did have, but a lot of people had him captain. So for me, that was like
Yeah,
actually
it's
really,
tough.
really good. Like, it helped me because
Us.
my score was already cooked. So I was like, okay, yeah. So the Wits captain obviously was the key. If you didn't captain anyone but Laird, then you're pretty happy regardless. But yeah, so a lot of carnage, but overall, I don't think my team was pretty bad. I mean, the only real one that I had really was say Liam Jones, of course, but I think most competitive teams had him. So you're like, okay, well, that doesn't really matter. He was in 43%. Outside of that, yeah, so not bad. Obviously, lots to happen, lots of changes. How you proceed to this week's going to be interesting. And so this podcast is really going to highlight where our thoughts are with that. And we're going to go through game by game and things like that. So lots to get
Yep.
into, I guess.
Talking
And
on
yeah.
structure, game by game, first of all, then talking about strategies for how to dig out yourself out of that deep hole that you might be in at this current point in time. And people are talking about burning 2 trades, 3 trades already to fix their team. So we'll get into the strategies and scenarios on how to get out of that. And then also captain options for this week. A really good note. So remember, 17th overall out of 170,000 people last year. 17th for captain scores last year. And I told Jock Reynolds on the podcast, I said, listen to this guy, Supercoach captains. Chris listens. Swizz, no fucking idea.
Yeah. Well, I went the faith of your guy, Dunkley, is my VC because I'm like, well, Brisbane are just going to beat Port. How's that not going to happen? And they just rolled over. And then, I thought, well, what am I going to do now? And I didn't actually have time. I would have gone Wits, but I was actually looking after my niece and 2 nephews and completely didn't watch any footy Saturday night, which was very unlike me. So, the little ones were a little bit too young for I think we were watching Madagascar movie. So, I was trying to update in my phone to get scores, but I was really frustrated. I was going, oh, yeah, that's right. I would have put Wits on. And then it was like the next day going, okay, Green or Laird? Let's just go Laird.
Right,
It's
that
round
sounds
one,
like
mate. The priorities are
I know.
round one only.
Save it for your
That's
podcast,
right. I know.
Swizz. No one wants to
That's
hear your
right.
sob story
I'm
on
just
how you
telling
did
you,
bad.
the sob story, mate. You can cry over me.
Save
That's
it.
why I've got my it top on
Save it.
because the
I'm gonna
rage
start
is
calling you
hard,
Justin
mate,
Timberlake,
right
mate,
now.
because you were fucking crying me a river. So first game
No.
of
Richmond Carlton. This is going to be my
Oh,
game. The big draw.
yeah.
What a great way
Drawn,
to start the
and
season.
Chris pointed out you are
88,000.
also
Pump.
ninth overall. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah,
Ninth
well,
It
equal
is
on the
ninth.
ladder?
tied ninth.
Equal
Tenth,
Tied ninth.
tenth
Tied
because of
ninth.
R. Yeah. It's still we got
Um,
relegated to 10th because we start with R. Like, how does that work?
All right.
Great,
So
great.
focusing on
Yeah. Well,
Richmond
just
and
great. First,
Carlton
Richmond
premium.
Carlton, great night. London Tavern pumping. Footy MCG pumping. Footy's great. Crap game of that. Like actually, the way because it's scrappy because the way Richmond play, and it really probably didn't lead for those halfbacks. And we probably actually saw a bit of a trend already all weekend that the halfbacks seem to have a bit more of their way than the midfielders. Cripps and Taranto, kind of put on a show in the midfield. I thought George Hewitt's first 3 quarters were unbelievable, and I was just sitting there going, okay, this guy is going to a next level this season. Here we go. Here's the first 120 of many. But yeah, it kind of faded in the last quarter when the heat was on, and that's where Cripps, and that's why Cripps's DT to Supercoach has got a larger gap because, I'm not too sure what his Supercoach was at halftime, but yeah, it was much more influential in that last quarter where obviously maximum points there because the game was so tight.
Well,
And
interestingly,
that'll
with
be
George
interesting.
Hewitt, he actually had 71% time on ground, which is why his score is so low, essentially. But he had 90% CBAs. So it's like they're like, okay, well, our best centre bounce mix is with George Hewitt, but come off the ground, buddy. You've had enough. Like I
Yeah.
don't understand why he was only played 71%. Maybe
Well,
still
I thought
recovering.
something might have been happening because I felt like some of that percentage was in that last quarter of that because he just didn't seem, and he could have been out there, and it was just maybe the Cripps show from a Carlton perspective. But the first 3 quarters or 2.5 quarters, it was just Hewitt everywhere, and that's where I was going. Oh my god, get on this guy! But yeah, it was interesting how the roles kind of reversed that second half. So something to probably I feel like it's going to be the same from that Carlton midfield. The three are probably going to get when Walsh gets back in, going to go very similar. But yeah, it's probably not. They're going to be around the mark, but they'll be around the mark with those other guys that we've talked about.
Speaking
Yeah,
of
well then
interesting, Taranto needs a lot of ball to get his 103, which we
I'll
kind
get
of
on to Timmy in
expected.
a second.
But we
I'll
no,
get
we,
on to
we kind
Timmy.
of knew it. However, there is still a lot of scope for them to improve because, and Chris, I'll lead you into this one because there was a low scoring game. There was not many CBAs at all.
Hmm.
And again, Richmond play the style of footy where they don't want stoppages. They want to keep that ball free and clear so that way your Dusties and your Boltons and all of these really damaging forward types, they don't want to lock it in. They want to get that ball flowing and moving forward, which really did impact Hopper, Chris. And you did warn us all. You even boasted online saying, I've got to get some snippets of all the times I said Hopper's a dud pick. Tell us.
So
Tell us
I
what you
don't.
know. And people are looking at jumping off.
Yeah. So look, it could be. There's two things at work here that I kind of noticed is that Carlton have definitely changed the way that they play to a sort of more attacking brand as well, and I think that leads towards they're trying to score more, get the ball in quicker to their forwards. Didn't really work out this week, which is 8 goals, 10 doesn't really bleed high scoring, but they want to try and counter attack and use that and obviously Richmond are doing that as well. What that meant was when they couldn't counter attack, there was a lot of mark kick, and then because they were doing that and they were both doing that, there wasn't a lot of stoppages. So it ended up for the game that there was only 70 stoppages. Now like last year, for example, Richmond was second last and they averaged 83 a game. So it was 13 stoppages less than Richmond's average as the second last team, which is really low. Now, Carlton, conversely, they're obviously a fairly high stoppage team because that's their strength. Like that's how they would usually man up and they would do that. So flipping that, it's going to be a lot harder for those mids to score as well. Cripps had 15 contested possessions, so that's where he actually got his scoring from. But I mean, 25 disposals from Cripps doesn't usually go to a 120 plus unless he's kicked a couple of goals. So he actually didn't, and he didn't do that this week. He only got kicked it behind. So that sort of score, he was really reliant on his clearances and his contested ball to get that amount. Conversely, Hopper had the complete opposite. Only one clearance for the game, which is the only reason that he even is on an AFL list is purely because he needs he's a clearance machine. Like he averaged 6.4 clearances per game when he played at GWS when he scored well.
He looked fumbly too. Like he looked off it and made some like overran the ball at times, fumbled at others, missed handballs on thirds. It looked very uncharacteristic. So I don't want to judge him on one performance, but again, that it's a combination of is it that low scoring game or is it the fact that we were expecting more from him and the fact that Richmond's not really getting the stoppages. It's kind of like 1 + 1 equals maybe get out of my side, which is where I think
Well,
people might be coming from. Swizz.
yeah, well, another reason for that was the incredibly high percentage of rebound 50s from Carlton. Like Richmond took that ball in so many times. I think it was 66 inside 50s, and Carlton had 57 rebounds of that. So some of the scores, actually, a couple of times Richmond scored, but like they'd score a point and then Carlton would turn it over inside their defensive 50, and Richmond, get the 7-point play or something like that. But yeah, it was just a lot of bombing in and intercept marks all night from the Blues defenders and that. So you would think if Richmond can clean up their forward use, we're going to get more of those CBAs. But that was a real bad night for the Richmond forwards.
And then you look at even Wiedering 120, Sard 115, McGovern 106, Doherty 108. If Doherty was back in defence by himself, he would have gone 140, I reckon.
Easy.
But because he was
I
in that
thought he was
midfield
early.
mix, that
Well,
A half
no,
time he
he
was
was
on like
looking good.
67, wasn't he?
no. I thought he
But
was
as
the
a
opposite. I
midfielder,
thought
though,
half time he wasn't actually that high, but I thought he had a massive second half. I could be
Oh,
wrong
and
on that.
that's
I
right.
felt like
He
yeah,
was really good in the first quarter, and he was
yeah,
going to the moon. And then the second quarter, he
that's right.
basically didn't touch it. I think he only had like
Barely
one or
didn't
two
touch it,
disposals.
and then it was big
Yeah,
sort
yeah,
of that last 40
yeah,
minutes again. So
yeah.
practically half an hour of that game, he did nothing and still scored, nearly 110. So, you think when he puts the 4 quarters together, it's gonna be huge. So, yeah, you're right about Hopper and really disappointed. Struggled to get to around contests as well. Pretty well was just using that, in that midfield. So there are some question marks, but hopefully we get to see a better version this week. Maybe hopefully it's a warm, fast deck at Adelaide and we get to see a few more goals. So we'll see what maybe a true reflection of Hopper there. Taranto is going to double ton at some point this year. He's going to absolutely put a team to the sword and he's going to get it right. Like he just looked like he's
Big
going to
call.
tear a team apart. The guys that we know
Like,
he's a number 2 pick.
have
He's
you
a
ever
jet.
owned Taranto? Because I feel like
Yeah,
it's
I've
your
owned
first
him
time.
many times, mate. But that's the first time I've ever seen him as the number 1 midfielder. And
Trust me,
he
I
seriously,
get,
yeah, he
I get what you're
seriously tore
saying.
that game apart. But
This is just
because
normal
yeah,
Taranto.
it
This
is.
is when
I'm
he
not
Yeah,
got
sure I've
30
ever
completely.
owned him.
disposals, 30 disposals,
Really?
8
Oh, you've
marks,
missed out that
couple
fun.
of
Yeah.
points because you missed the
Oh,
goals.
mate, mate, there's going to be a game where he's going 40 touches and kicking 5 this year.
People like I've been saying that like for years and just never happened. Like
Yeah, but the
that's
problem
just,
is he's now the guy. Like he's the only guy.
it
He
still has
looked
to come
that far
together.
our best player. It wasn't funny.
Oh mate,
Outside
Mate,
of
I
one,
think I'm at some kind of second ring cockfight. Can you have your
yeah.
say and then let the
Okay,
other one have their
there's
say?
one.
It's like wobble gobble, wobble gobble, wobble gobble.
There's one
Right?
one question I've been asked quite a few people because people are looking at the halfbacks and asking me about Daniel Rioli and is his role good enough to be a viable selection in the back line? Now, my only issue is that because the amount of halfbacks Richmond have now, Daniel looks fantastic. When he gets the spread and the run, he's so damaging. And surely at some point there'll be somebody who'll put some time into that because they can't just let him run around and get 500-600 meters throughout a game. But then does that mean Short, who was, inside wing, he can push back, Baker, Vlosten, Richmond do have options in there. So that's my only worry about Rioli going, okay, what happens if A, he gets attention or B, Richmond adjusts? And we've talked about like sort of that Fremantle factor. Now, obviously the Dockers were on absolutely steroids in their backline this week. But some weeks it's one player, some weeks it's another. And I just think that's the issue with like, I think it can be 90 for sure. There's no problems, but can Rioli push those top guys? And we see the quality. And when we go through all the other games, we've already talked about Doherty. Like Doherty's averaging 110, no problem. So, and we'll get into some other defenders. Rioli's not going 110. So that's where I find it hard for him to be a viable option.
Speaking of defenders and viable options, we'll briefly touch on Cowan, someone to watch.
Yeah, he's
Carlton
good.
117k defender. He looked quite good, but the issue I found was he was on Bolton. So I mean that's a really tough gig. It's not a player you can sort of stand next to and feel like you can play your natural game because they're so damaging. Dusty and Bolton, you're kind of automatically looking over your shoulder.
Well,
Got
I
some
thought that
cramp,
was
got subbed
that
off.
was straight off a great confidence in the kid that they put him on
Oh
show.
yeah,
And he was willing to do some of the tough 1%ers. Like the amount of times, and that's the difference, obviously being there and being. I was probably on that MC the City end half forward flank, so getting to actually see him half back, and when a player is highly valued by his teammates when they get around him, and it's usually not on camera. But there was a couple of times he put in some sport to put his body in the right place, and off screen they would have been getting around him at that, and you're just going, okay, this kid is a seriously good kid, and the people around me are talking about it. Go, how good's this young fella coming in? He looked tough. He looked AFL ready. So there's definitely a position there for him. The only problem with comparing, say, him and Hollands is just a running machine. He ran 16 Ks on the weekend of that, and I think he was the number one runner on the ground. So they've brought him in
yeah.
to do that. Where Cowan, at the moment, the question's going to be his tank. Benny.
So Hollands did a lot of unrewarded stuff too. Put on a shepherd, like ran all the way down, put a shepherd on so the defender could actually run through. And I was like, he's doing the team stuff, but that doesn't always equate to SC. Now, Cowan, he
And he's
did
a
get
wingman,
subbed
which is a
off.
problem.
Oh yeah, automatically, unless you're Callahan.
Yeah.
um, but so yeah, Cowan got subbed out of the game. He had like cramps or something, I believe,
Yeah,
and
he did.
which isn't to be unexpected. I mean, first full game at that high intensity. Now, Pitney obviously failed the fitness test. Thanks for you guys to hear that in first time instead of me donating $2 so you can bloody see the feed and stop rambling about Pitney and how Pitney is for the team and not paying attention to the chat. So it's interesting because Carlton have already said if they play Pitney and De Koning, then pretty much the plan is for Pitney to get subbed out of the game, De Koning to ruck for the finish. And then that way that frees up their space. So if both rucks are named at some point and Cowan's there, I don't see him being sub at all. And I think that kind of rounds us up for that game, boys.